Hello, dear viewers of my video. I hope you enjoy watching it and look forward to your feedback in the comments. I didn't think skipping one party could end my career. I'd been the lead systems architect at Wexler Dynamics for 8 years, the kind of job where your name rarely appears on a press release, but the entire company would collapse if you disappeared for more than 72 hours. My work was buried deep inside the system: logic trees, database orchestration, failover protocols. People like to joke that my code had more seniority than most of the executive team. My days were simple: 12-hour stretches in a glass-walled office, dinners eaten over a desk littered with diagrams, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing our $2 billion platform run without a single unscheduled outage in half a decade. Then came the invitation. It didn't arrive by email, but as a glossy, gold-embossed envelope placed directly on my keyboard. The HR assistant hovered nearby, smiling in a way that wasn't entirely friendly. Inside, an invitation to the CEO's son's 7th birthday party. The venue? A rented botanical garden. The entertainment? A magician flown in from Las Vegas and a live petting zoo. The memo on the back said, "All staff attendance mandatory. Morale is our strongest asset, and attendance will be noted." I stared at it for a long moment, wondering how a children's party had somehow made its way into my job description. The problem wasn't that I disliked children. The problem was that I was 2 days from locking the biggest deployment of my career, a next-gen integration module that could save us millions. We had a 72-hour window before our client's infrastructure upgrade. If we missed it, we'd be negotiating penalties instead of celebrating success. So I sent a polite email to HR. "Regretfully, I will not be able to attend due to critical pre-launch preparations." It was Saturday. I worked until midnight, went home to a quiet apartment, and fell asleep with a network topology map still open on my laptop. The next morning, I knew something was wrong before I'd even logged in. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. People avoided my eyes. Even Jordan from QA, who once spent 40 minutes explaining the plot of his favorite sci-fi series to me, gave me a weak half-smile and quickly looked away. At 9:12 a.m., the intercom clicked. "Brian, boardroom, now." The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Half the executive suite sat there, coffee cups steaming in front of them. The CEO, Patrick Wexler, leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled like a man about to deliver a rehearsed verdict. "This," he began, tapping a printed attendance list, "is a complete disrespect to me and the entire company." I blinked. "Because I didn't attend a birthday party?" Patrick's jaw tightened. "Because you showed us all where your priorities are. Lack of commitment is unacceptable at Wexler Dynamics. Effective immediately, you're released from your duties." The words didn't register at first. They couldn't. Not after 10 years of 2 a.m. troubleshooting sessions, missed family gatherings, and the time I spent Christmas Eve in the server room during an unexpected load spike. "Patrick," I began. "It's not up for discussion," he cut in, waving toward the HR rep in the corner. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings." I glanced at my laptop bag. Inside was my work machine, my badge, and, most importantly, the encryption keys that unlocked half our proprietary architecture. Without them, the new deployment wouldn't happen. My stomach turned cold. My mother's health insurance was tied to my position. The system I'd nurtured for a decade was now being dropped into hands that barely understood how it worked. I nodded once, picked up my bag, and walked out without another word. But I wasn't done. In the elevator, I caught sight of my reflection. Pale, but steady. I had been humiliated, yes, but something inside had already shifted. This wasn't going to be the quiet end of my career. When the door slid open on the ground floor, I nearly collided with Marcy from compliance. She glanced at the box in my arms, her brow furrowing. "Tell me they didn't." "They did," I said. Her eyes darted toward the security guard trailing me. "Call me later," she whispered, slipping a folded piece of paper into my palm before walking away. I didn't open it until I reached my car. Inside, in Marcy's tidy handwriting, were 6 names, all people I knew from different departments, all quietly pushed out in the past 2 years, under similarly non-negotiable circumstances. Beneath the names, she'd written, "You're not the only one, and you're not powerless." I stared at it for a long moment, the edges of my humiliation hardening into something sharper. By the time I drove out of the parking garage, the seed of an idea had already taken root. Patrick thought firing me was the end of the story. He didn't realize it was just the beginning. And before the week was over, the chaos in this office would make missing that party look like the smallest mistake in company history. The morning after the boardroom ambush, I came in early, before most of the office arrived, telling myself it was just to clear out my desk. Truthfully, I wanted to see the place one last time on my own terms. The building was still half asleep, the hum of the HVAC louder than any conversation. The glass doors let in a pale winter light that made the lobby look colder than it was. I swiped my badge out of habit, feeling the small vibration of the reader acknowledging me. Probably the last time I'd hear that sound. My desk sat at the far end of the floor, near the development cluster. From a distance, I could already see something resting on it, an unfamiliar, deliberate shape. As I got closer, the details came into focus. A thick white envelope, heavy paper stock, my name typed in capital letters across the front. No, "Hi Brian," no, "Please read." Just that blocky, impersonal label, as if my identity had been reduced to a filing category. I sat down, the chair rolling forward, with its usual soft squeak, and slid a finger under the flap. The papers inside were crisp, uncreased, and, I realized, unsigned by me, but sealed in finality nonetheless. The first sheet, Order for Immediate Release from Employment, signed by Patrick Wexler himself in blue ink, the strokes sharp enough to look like they were carved, not written. The second sheet held only one sentence in bold: Return all company property, including building pass, no later than 5:01 p.m. today. That was it. No explanation, no reference to my years of service, not even the polite corporate phrases people add to pretend a dismissal is mutual. Just an order to hand over my access and be gone. I set the papers down, feeling the edge of the badge lanyard pressing against my collarbone. The badge itself seemed to have gained weight overnight, as though it was already pulling toward the desk where it would stay. Somewhere behind me, in the break area, a voice carried in a half-whisper. Heard it was because she didn't go. The CEO's kids' party. How could she think that was okay? Then the sound of a coffee machine hissing, followed by laughter too quiet to be accidental. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. I'd dealt with office politics before, but this was different. My entire career was being distilled into a single petty headline: the woman who lost her job over cake and balloons. I opened my bottom drawer and began sorting. Personal notebooks in one pile, company binders in another. I took my time, not because I needed to, but because I could feel the eyes on me. A few people glanced over quickly and then back at their screens, the kind of furtive curiosity you see in hospital waiting rooms or accident scenes. My phone buzzed against the desk, startling me. A single line on the screen. Tom Kessler. Heard what happened. Meet me at Cornerstone Cafe in 30? Don't say no. Tom. Former CFO. Gone for almost a year now, his departure explained only as personal reasons. We'd crossed paths during budget reviews and once during a project audit. He was sharp, controlled, and never wasted words. If he was reaching out now, it wasn't to offer condolences. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What does he know? I typed back a single word. Yes. 15 minutes later, I placed my badge on top of the envelope, aligning it neatly with the papers. The lanyard fell into a loose coil, the photo ID turned face down. I stood, slid my laptop into my bag, and took one last slow look at the workstation I had practically lived at for a decade. As I walked toward the elevator, the floor seemed to hold its breath. Conversations paused. A swivel chair squeaked somewhere in the distance. I didn't turn to see who was watching. Marcy from compliance appeared near the printer as I passed. She glanced at the box in my arms, then at me. Her eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in understanding. Without breaking stride, she slipped a folded piece of paper into my free hand and murmured, "Read later." I didn't open it until I reached my car. Inside were 6 neatly written names, all people I recognized from different departments, all quietly forced out over the last 2 years. Beneath them, in Marcy's tidy script, "You're not the only one, and you're not powerless." I sat there with the note in my lap, the engine idling, the city moving around me like I was behind glass. Whatever Tom wanted to discuss, it suddenly felt less like a conversation and more like the first step in something larger, something with teeth. I turned the key, pulling out into the late morning traffic. I wasn't walking away from the company anymore. I was walking towards something else entirely, and I had the sudden, undeniable sense that this story, my story, was nowhere near finished. Cornerstone Cafe smelled of roasted almonds and freshly ground espresso, the kind of warmth that clings to your clothes long after you leave. I spotted Tom instantly, back to the wall, view of the door, the cautious posture of someone who expects trouble but wants to see it coming. Gone were the tailored charcoal suits he wore at Wexler Dynamics. Now he was in a navy sweater and dark jeans, hair slightly longer, face leaner. He looked like a man who'd put distance between himself and the boardroom, but not the sharpness that had gotten him there in the first place. "Brian," he said, standing briefly to shake my hand. His grip was steady, eyes searching. "Sit." I slid into the chair opposite him. A ceramic mug already waited at my place, steam curling into the cool morning air. "I heard what happened," Tom began, voice low enough to be lost in the hum of the cafe. "They're saying it was about the party, aren't they?" My lips curved in something that was more of a grimace than a smile. Apparently, skipping cake and a magician is an unforgivable act of corporate treason. He didn't return the smile. "That's the story they want floating around. Makes it sound petty, your fault even, but that's not the reason they fired you." I leaned in. "Then what is?" Tom's gaze flicked toward the counter, scanning the staff, then back to me. "Do you remember the resource allocation audit I did my last quarter? The one where I asked for every line item tied to your department?" I frowned. "You said it was for budget forecasting." "It was," he said, "but not for them. For you." Before I could respond, he reached into his leather messenger bag and pulled out a small black USB stick. He didn't slide it across the table right away. He just held it between his thumb and forefinger, turning it slowly as though measuring its weight. "I've seen too many people at Wexler get pushed out with nothing," he said finally. "I wasn't going to let that happen to you, so I built you an insurance policy." My pulse quickened. "What kind of policy?" "A legal one." His tone carried the faint satisfaction of someone who'd planned too far ahead to be caught. While I was still CFO, I had access to every intellectual property filing, every patent registration, every licensing agreement. Quietly, I drafted a clause and buried it deep inside the licensing framework for your algorithm. It states that in the event of your termination without cause, full rights to the original code, patents, and all active licenses revert to you as the sole architect. I blinked at him. That wouldn't get past legal. "They didn't notice," Tom said, almost enjoying my disbelief. "I disguised it as a compliance renewal protocol. The language is dry enough to make your eyes glaze over, and it's wedged between 2 sections no one reads. Legal filed it without question. HR never saw it. And because it was part of the international licensing packet, it's registered outside U.S. jurisdiction. That makes it very, very hard to challenge." Finally, he placed the USB stick on the table between us, like he was setting down a loaded weapon. "What's on it?" I asked. "Everything," he said. "Your full source code, documentation, patents, license agreements with every active client, all time-stamped, all traced directly back to you. And because of that clause, as of this morning, Wexler Dynamics no longer owns the thing keeping half their revenue alive. You do. The noise of the cafe faded. I could still see people moving, hear the faint hiss of the espresso machine, but it felt distant, like I'd stepped into a soundproof room. You're telling me, I said slowly, that the algorithm, worth nearly $1 billion by conservative estimates, is legally mine? Tom nodded. And they don't know yet, but they will. And when they do, they'll have two choices: negotiate with you or watch their contracts collapse. I stared at the USB stick. It was small enough to lose in a coat pocket, yet heavier in meaning than anything I'd ever held. My fingers hovered over it, but didn't touch. Why? I asked finally. Why go this far for me? His eyes softened, just a fraction. Because you built something worth protecting, and because I knew Patrick would try to take it from you sooner or later. I didn't expect him to be arrogant enough to hand it over to you by firing you first. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. For the first time since the boardroom, the coil of humiliation and anger inside me loosened. Something else pushed in to fill the space. A cautious, fragile feeling I hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Hope. I reached out, closing my hand around the USB stick. It was cold against my skin, solid and undeniable. Then, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I guess the game just changed. Tom smiled faintly. Brian, the game hasn't even started yet. And for the first time in days, I believed him. I left the cafe with the USB in my pocket and a sensation I hadn't felt in days. Steadiness. The city moved around me in its usual rhythm. Buses sighing at curbs, a courier gliding past on a bike. But everything inside me was precise lines and clean edges. No noise, no panic, just steps. I didn't go home. I crossed the street to a co-working space I used on late deployments, a quiet glass box above a florist that always smelled faintly of eucalyptus. The receptionist waved me in with the easy recognition of someone who'd seen me too many times at 2 a.m. I took the last booth by the window, opened my laptop, and set the USB on the table like a small black promise. Tom's clause meant I already owned the algorithm in principle, but principle is only half a system. The other half is execution. I plugged in the drive. The folders were simple and ruthless: core, docs, licensing, verifications. Inside, licensing lived a neat row of contracts with Wexler's largest clients, each bearing my name alongside the company's, and a quiet addendum that now felt thunderous. In the event of termination without cause of the named architect, all rights revert to said architect, and any further use requires reissuance of keys by same. I exhaled, checked timestamps, and opened the transfer script in verifications. Tom had built it like he built everything: minimal, durable, and a little smug. The script created a clean custody trail in an external registry, reissued license identifiers under my authority, and rotated encryption keys so that any stale instance tied to the company's servers would fail gracefully. Gracefully, in this context, meaning immediately and completely. Before I ran anything, I called Marcy. "Tell me you're somewhere quiet," she said. No greeting, just urgency. "I'm moving ownership," I said. "Legally, it's already mine. Technically, it will be in about 10 minutes. A beat of silence. "They won't expect it this fast." "They taught me speed," I said. "I'm returning the lesson." "Do it," she whispered. "And, Brian, screenshot everything." I smiled despite myself. Already doing it. I authenticated into the external registry Tom had chosen, not ours, never ours, and began the transfer. One by one, the blocks lit up as rights shifted: source bundle, patent package, active licenses, historical releases, support chains. Each confirmation chimed a soft, precise note through my headphones. I felt like I was tuning an instrument I'd built and finally hearing it play in my key. The last step was the keys. I pulled up the issuance console, my console now, and rotated the primary and secondary sets. Old keys invalidated, new keys generated and vaulted. A final prompt appeared. Notify license holders? I selected yes and chose the leanest message possible. Administrative update. Keys reissued under architect authority. No service interruption if updated within window. Contact provided. Simple, clear, true. I closed the laptop and let the quiet settle. Outside, a delivery truck beeped as it reversed. Above me, the HVAC murmured like a sleeping thing. My phone lay still on the table, screen dark. It didn't stay dark for long. At 2:17 p.m., the first vibration. An email from Jordan in QA. Subject: Are you seeing this? The body was just a screenshot of our internal dashboard, blinking red over the authentication layer. 2:23 p.m., a text from a number I didn't recognize but definitely remembered. Vincent. Operations. We need to talk. Now. 2:28 p.m., a call from the main line. I let it go to voicemail. 2:31 p.m., 3 more calls, 2 more emails, and a Slack ping to my personal account that I hadn't used since college. Please, Brian. The clients are timing out. The system wasn't down. It was honest. Without valid keys, the licenses were no longer theirs to claim. I had not frozen anyone's work. I had simply refused to keep the doors open for people who'd changed the locks on me first. At 3:05 p.m., my phone flashed Patrick Wexler. I watched it ring. I watched it stop. Another email popped up from legal. Urgent. Request for temporary waiver. I skimmed the dense paragraphs, all soft edges, all for the sake of our clients, and felt the old familiarity of their tactics, the way concern became a net. I wrote back a single sentence. Please refer to Clause 14D of the International Licensing Packet and the reversion trigger fully executed at 09:42 today. 3 minutes later, a reply. We are reviewing. I pictured the conference room. Copies sliding, voices clipped. The quiet calculation of people who had just realized the floor beneath them had always been borrowed. By 3:40 p.m., the messages shifted tone. Not urgent, but careful. From Patrick. Subject: Conversation, Brian. Let's discuss a path forward that benefits all parties. I'm sure we can find a solution that honors your contributions. I stared at the word honors until it blurred. Then my phone rang again. Don't answer if you're not ready, Tom said when I picked up, but you should know what they're doing. I have a guess, I said. They're convening emergency council, he replied. Which is what you want. The minute they pull those contracts, they'll see the signatures, the addenda, the reversion trigger. They thought they could ride your work into the next quarter and call it loyalty. What they built was a paper wall. Keys rotated, I said. Licenses updated. Notices out. He let out a low breath that sounded a little like a laugh. Then they've created their own problem. If they try to run a patched version, they'll violate every agreement. If they sit still, they'll have to call you. They're already calling, I said. Good. Let them feel the clock. Through the window, I could see the florist carrying buckets of pale roses to the sidewalk, angling them toward the last of the afternoon sun. It was almost beautiful, the ordinariness of it, against the knowledge that an entire executive floor a few blocks away had entered a new phase called consequence. At 4:12 p.m., Marcy texted. They finally read 14D. Silence in here, like someone pulled the power. You okay? I am, I wrote back, and surprised myself with how true it felt. Then the clients began to write directly, polite, professional, unruffled. Received notice. Updating keys. Please confirm support channel. The ones who dealt with me personally were the calmest. They'd learned over the years that when I wrote no interruption, I meant it. Only then did I open the internal note Tom had tucked into the USB's root directory. One line: if you must, be kind to the people who trusted your work. Everyone else built their own weather. The calls kept coming. I let most of them pass. When I finally answered, it wasn't Patrick. Brian, it's Thomas. His voice had that composed cadence that could make a fire drill sound like a calendar reminder. I'm looped into their council as former officer for context. They're receptive. To what? I asked. To terms, he said. They'll posture. They'll suggest joint stewardship, transitional oversight, goodwill gestures. But the math is simple. You hold the code. You hold the rights. You hold the keys. They hold a calendar full of client obligations with your name at the center. I leaned my head back against the booth and closed my eyes. For the first time since the boardroom, my breath moved all the way down into my lungs. Why did you do it, Tom? I asked, the question sharper than I intended. The claws, the drive, all of it. Why me? There was a pause, not empty, but careful. Because you were the only person in that building who never treated the system like a ladder, he said. You treated it like a promise. His tone shifted, a fraction tighter. And because some promises have to be defended in advance. Before I could press, another call started flashing across my screen. The main number of a client whose contract could tip the balance of a quarter. I hesitated, torn between the explanation I wanted and the action I needed. Answer that, Tom said softly, as if reading the screen through the line. I'll call back in an hour. They'll have moved from denial to proposals by then. The line clicked. I took the client call, walked them through the key rotation, confirmed their service window, and ended with a sentence that felt like a hand extended across a table. You won't feel a thing but compliance. When I hung up, the booth was quiet again. My reflection in the window looked like a woman I recognized at last. Tired, yes, but not small. Not erased. More messages stacked. The company's leadership had passed from confusion into strategy, the way storms move from scattered to organized. Offers arrived in careful language. Bridge period, shared governance, legacy acknowledgement. All the phrases that say, we didn't mean to lock the door while you were still inside. I typed a single draft and saved it without sending. I will entertain proposals tomorrow at 10. Please bring signatures that count. Outside, the florist flipped the sign to closed. The sun slid behind a building and turned the street the color of tea. My phone buzzed once more. Tom again, but I let it go. In the gentle surge of chaos, I hadn't had time to understand him. Not really. The motive behind the foresight. The stake he hadn't named. For now, it was enough that the system I built finally belonged to the person who built it. Enough that somewhere on the executive floor, the word commitment had gained a definition they hadn't intended. Keep your promises, or the architecture will. I packed the USB, zipped the bag, and stood. Tomorrow I'd face the room that dismissed me and ask them to use my name correctly. Tonight I would walk home through air that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and roses and remind myself of the simplest truth a decade of work had taught me. If you design something to withstand pressure, make sure you do too. By noon, the company had gone from quiet confusion to open panic. It started with a ripple. A few engineers pinging each other about strange access errors, license keys suddenly failing. Within an hour, the ripple became a wave. I knew because even with my phone on silent, I could see the flood of notifications stacking up on my lock screen. Urgent. Critical system issue. Call immediately. I didn't answer any of them. At my kitchen table, coffee gone cold beside my laptop, I was busy finalizing the transfer paperwork Tom had shown me how to initiate. The last digital signature slid into place with a quiet ping from my secure server. My name, my full legal name, now sat on the ownership record for the algorithm, the patents, and every active client license. 2 weeks ago, Tom had registered a holding company in my name. 2 weeks ago, he had already anticipated this day. Now, every client dependency the company had built over the last decade ran through me. And the old keys they still clung to? They were meaningless. By 2 o'clock, my phone lit up with messages from people still inside. From Jenna, UX lead. Brian, what happened? The API's locked. No one can get in. From Mark, Sysadmin. They're saying legal is involved. Patrick's office door is shut. He's screaming. From an unknown number. Call me now, CEO. I didn't call. Instead, I opened a private chat window with Tom. The little typing bubble appeared almost immediately. Tom. They've called an emergency board meeting. Patent team tried to fast-track a filing to get around you. Me. And? Tom. Denied before it even reached the register. Your company filed it 2 weeks ago, in your name. They just figured that out. I pictured Patrick, our CEO, standing over his lawyers, red-faced, voice rising, while someone from IP compliance explained that every road he thought was open was now a dead end. The moment the realization sank in for them, that their billion-dollar golden goose had just walked out the door, I almost wished I could have seen it. Almost. I typed back. So, they're stuck? Tom. Legally, yes. Functionally, completely. They have no right to run the system now. Every hour without it costs them clients. Stage 2 is ready if you are. Stage 2. We hadn't talked about it in detail yet. He'd just called it the point of no return. I stared at the blinking cursor, feeling the weight of that choice. Before I could reply, another notification popped up. This one a forwarded internal memo from someone brave enough to leak it to me. As of this morning, all operational rights to the adaptive core algorithm have been reassigned externally. Our legal position is compromised due to prior contract language. Immediate focus. Damage control with top-tier clients. Do not communicate externally without clearance. The memo didn't name me, but I was the phantom in every line. Finally, I wrote to Tom. Tell me why you did it. All of it. A long pause. Then his reply came. Tom. Because I've seen them bury people like you, like us, over and over. I had the means to stop it once. I wasn't going to waste that chance. They'll spin it as betrayal, but the truth is, I just leveled the field. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse steadying for the first time in days. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but right now, with the system locked, the patents airtight, and their panic spiraling, I felt something I hadn't since the day I walked out of that boardroom. Like I was the hero in one of those films, where the underdog outsmarts the empire. Only this time, it wasn't fiction. And stage 2 was about to begin. The call came less than 24 hours after the patents hit the registry under my name. I was at my kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside my laptop, reviewing the last set of client acknowledgments, when the phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. The country code alone told me everything. It belonged to a place where one of Wexler's fiercest rivals kept its global headquarters. For a few seconds, I let it ring. It was almost satisfying, holding the decision in my hand like a coin I could flip. Then I answered. Brian Lannery? The voice was smooth, deliberate, a salesman's confidence layered over a strategist's precision. Daniel Brooks, Vice President of Strategic Development at Cornet Systems. I believe we should talk. Cornet. The name alone could wipe the smugness off Patrick Wexler's face. For a decade, they had been our shadow, always chasing, always one innovation behind. And now they saw an opening. I'm listening, I said, keeping my tone neutral. We've been following recent developments at Wexler Dynamics, Daniel continued. We understand that certain intellectual properties have been reassigned. We'd like to explore licensing your adaptive core algorithm, exclusively. Exclusively, I repeated, letting the word sit between us. We're prepared to move quickly, he added. Our board is willing to authorize an aggressive valuation to ensure this doesn't become a bidding war. That was code for, we know there's a clock running, and we want to stop it before someone else gets the prize. When do you want to meet? I asked. As soon as possible. We can have our senior team in your city by tomorrow morning. I agreed, gave him the address of a private conference suite I sometimes used for client work, and hung up. Then I opened my secure messaging app and drafted a different kind of message. To Patrick Wexler. Subject, ultimatum. You have 48 hours to present an acceptable buyback or partnership proposal for the adaptive core algorithm. After that, I will proceed with alternative licensing arrangements. Every day past that window will result in measurable devaluation of Wexler Dynamics' core offerings. This is not a threat. It is a forecast. I read it twice. No edits. Sent. The message showed read within seconds. No reply. By the next morning, CoreNet's delegation was waiting in the polished conference room. 3 executives in dark suits, each with a folder neatly aligned in front of them. Daniel greeted me with the kind of smile that masks calculation. "We appreciate you meeting us on short notice," he said, motioning for me to sit. The proposal was already printed and bound. Numbers slid across the table. Hundreds of millions in upfront payment, a royalty structure for every contract built on my algorithm, guaranteed legal defense if Wexler tried to challenge the arrangement. "You understand what this means," Daniel said. "We wouldn't just be acquiring technology, we'd be dismantling Wexler's competitive edge overnight." I kept my voice steady. "It's a strong offer, but I won't be making a commitment today." He nodded, unsurprised. "We respect due diligence, but I should mention, this is the highest initial offer CoreNet has extended in more than a decade." I let a small, polite smile answer him, tucked the proposal into my briefcase, and left without promising anything. In the elevator down to the lobby, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Patrick, 2 from the company's legal department, 1 from an unknown number I suspected was a nervous client already exploring an exit strategy. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sent a single line to Tom. "Stage 2 is moving. CoreNet's in play. Ultimatum sent." His reply was immediate. "Good. Keep them guessing. Don't let Wexler know how far you're willing to go. And don't let CoreNet think they're the only game in town. Make them compete." That was the advantage now. Control. For the first time since the boardroom ambush, I was dictating the tempo. Every day that passed without resolution cost Wexler credibility, clients, and market value. Every conversation I had with a competitor made them sweat harder. And for me, it was strangely calm. The kind of calm you get when you realize you're holding every card that matters. As I walked out into the bright winter air, I pictured the decisive meeting already taking shape. A table where Patrick and CoreNet's team both tried to outbid each other for what I'd built. Only this time, I wouldn't be the one fighting to keep my seat. This time, I'd be the one setting the price. The conference room was the kind you saw in glossy corporate brochures. Polished walnut table, black leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. But the air in it wasn't sleek or polished. It was tight, brittle. CoreNet's team was already there when I walked in, their expressions a blend of professionalism and the faint satisfaction of predators who'd scented blood. They sat on one side of the table, a stack of bound proposals neatly arranged in front of them. On the opposite side, Patrick Wexler, the man who had once congratulated me for making the impossible possible, sat stiffly, flanked by 2 company lawyers. To his right was his son, Evan, the same one whose birthday party I hadn't attended. He looked younger here than he did in the company's PR photos, and smaller somehow, as if the tailored suit had been cut for a man twice his size. "Brian," Patrick began, his voice pitched low, almost soothing. "Let's be adults about this." I placed my briefcase on the table, clicked open the latch, and drew out a slim folder. "I intend to." Sliding into the chair opposite them, I laid the first document in front of me and turned it so the Wexler side could read it. "This," I said evenly, "is the registered ownership record for the adaptive core algorithm. International patent, filed and approved 14 days before my dismissal. It's filed under Lannery Systems, my company." I didn't wait for them to respond before adding the second document. "This is the licensing framework. You'll notice Clause 14D, which states that in the event of termination without cause, all rights revert to the architect. That's me." The third document was heavier, pages of client contracts. "And here," I continued, "is the current registry of every active client license, now issued under my company name. As of this moment, None of your key accounts have legal access to the adaptive core system without going through me. Patrick's jaw flexed. His lawyers leaned in, scanning the pages, their eyes darting across lines of text they had clearly never read before. "You've put us in an impossible position," Patrick said finally. "No," I said, my voice calm, deliberate. "You put yourself there. You fired your lead architect over a birthday party. You didn't review the contracts you signed. You prioritized family appearances over strategic assets. Nepotism is expensive." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Evan's posture stiffen. His cheeks flushed, and he looked down at the table as if the grain of the wood might offer him an escape route. Patrick leaned forward, palms flat on the table. "Do you have any idea—" "Yes," I cut in. "I know exactly what the losses are. I've done the math. Between breached contracts, client attrition, and a collapsed market position, you're looking at a minimum of $240 million in direct losses over the next quarter. That's before CoreNet deploys Adaptive Core under their own branding, which they're prepared to do." On cue, Daniel Brooks from CoreNet spoke for the first time. "We're more than ready to bring Adaptive Core into our portfolio, exclusively." His tone was polite, but the weight behind it was deliberate. Patrick shot him a look, but said nothing. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't the uncomfortable kind, not for me. For them, it was a slow constriction, the realization that the terms of this meeting were mine, not theirs. "I didn't come here to gloat," I said finally. "I came here to offer you a choice. You can negotiate now, with CoreNet in the room, or you can watch your market position erode in real time. This isn't a threat, it's a forecast. And if there's one thing you know about me, Patrick, my forecasts are accurate." Evan's hands were folded tightly on the table, knuckles white. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. Patrick looked down at the documents at last. He didn't touch them, but his gaze followed the text line by line, and I could see the moment he understood that there was no loophole to claw back what he'd thrown away. "You could have avoided this," I said quietly. "All you had to do was value the people who built the foundation you've been standing on. Instead, you turned it into a family vanity project, and now you're going to pay for that choice, one way or another." Patrick's lawyers began murmuring to him, low and urgent. On the CoreNet side of the table, Daniel sat perfectly still, his hands folded, his eyes never leaving me. He knew I was winning before the first counteroffer was even made. For the first time since walking out of that boardroom, the balance of power was not just in my favor. It was visible. And the CEO of Wexler Dynamics, whose confidence had once been unshakable, now sat staring at the scale of his own losses, hundreds of millions slipping through his fingers, and all because of a cake, a party, and a son who now sat humiliated beside him. The cameras were blinding, a solid wall of light and sound, the mechanical click of shutters overlapping with the low hum of voices in the press hall. Behind me, the enormous backdrop read in bold, clean letters, "Lannery Systems." Not a sub-brand, not a division. My company. 10 years ago, I'd have stood here representing Wexler Dynamics, introducing the very system they thought they could take from me. Now, I was introducing it back to the world under my own name, and at a price that would make even the most cynical investors stop talking mid-sentence. CoreNet's CEO, a tall, deliberate man named Simon Kerr, stood to my left, the kind of executive who rarely smiles unless the ink is drying. Today, he smiled. On the polished table between us sat the contracts, each page thick with clauses and protections we'd both fought hard to include. "Today," the announcer's voice carried through the room, "marks a historic partnership between Lannery Systems and CoreNet. This agreement, centered on the Adaptive Core platform, is valued at $940 million. The applause was immediate, sharp, sustained, and for me, almost surreal. I could feel the weight of the moment settling over my shoulders, not as a burden, but as proof. Simon extended a pen toward me. I took it, felt the balance of it in my hand, and signed slowly, each letter deliberate. The ink glistened for a heartbeat before setting. The flashes from the cameras flared again, capturing the exact moment my name joined the contract. For the official photos, we shook hands, the two of us turning just enough toward the lenses to give them what they came for. It wasn't until the questions started that I realized how much control I held. "Brian," a reporter in the front row called, "what does this mean for Wexler Dynamics?" I kept my expression neutral. "It means the technology will now reach its full potential. The rest is for Wexler's leadership to address." Another question followed, then another, but I answered only the ones that mattered, each reply precise and intentional. I didn't need to gloat. The numbers spoke for themselves. As the conference wound down and people began to leave, I stepped off to the side, my phone vibrating in my pocket. A news alert lit up the screen. Wexler Dynamics in market freefall after loss of flagship technology. I opened it. The lead image was Patrick Wexler himself, emerging from his glass-fronted headquarters, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. His posture was rigid, the kind of stiffness that comes from trying to project control when you've lost it. The second image was Evan. Not the polished, confident air from company newsletters, but a young man caught mid-stride, tie crooked, phone to his ear, face pale. The caption read, "Evan Wexler, once positioned as successor, faces uncertain role as company reels from billion-dollar loss." I studied the photo for a long moment. There was no satisfaction in seeing him humiliated, but there was clarity. Choices had consequences, and the chain reaction from one petty, short-sighted decision had dismantled an empire. The truth was, this wasn't just about the money. Yes, $940 million was staggering, the kind of number that would secure my life and fund anything I wanted to build. But the real victory was intangible. A liberation from the boardroom where I'd been underestimated, the whispered comments about commitment, the invisible ceiling I'd been expected to accept. I had cut every tie, not in anger, but in precision. When the last photographer left, the stage was quiet. The chairs stood empty, the contracts neatly stacked, the pens lined up like sentinels. I stayed a moment longer, listening to the quiet hum of the air system and the faint echo of my own footsteps. Silence. It had been my most powerful strategy. When they provoked, I didn't react. When they postured, I didn't respond. I moved in quiet, letting them fill the air with noise until the only voice that mattered was the one they hadn't been listening to. I've learned this. The value of a person is not defined by those who overlook or underestimate them. It's determined by what they build and by how they stand when the underestimation ends. Today, I stood taller than I ever had. And this time, the architecture I had built belonged entirely to me.